بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
الحمد لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh, and welcome to Islamic OASIS Live. Brothers and sisters, a lot has been going on, a lot is going on. This is the third week of, maybe second, maybe it looks so long already, the week of after the inauguration of Trump. There over, I think, 100 executive orders have been passed. There's one that is going to pass today, which says that anyone speaking or what they consider to be anti-Semitic or pro-Gaza kind of thing, or anybody supporting what they deem to be supporting resistance can be deported and jailed. There's a lot that is cooking here. We don't want that. What that means could be another thing. Maybe what the next plan might be for Gaza, which is ethnic cleansing, removing the people from Gaza into Jordan or Egypt. This may be the new plan, and maybe they're thinking that anybody that speaks against this plan is an enemy and should be removed. So there's a lot going on. Some schools were affected already and things like that. The same kind of thing we saw previously in the last few weeks in Canada, where anyone trying to say anything regarding the issue of Palestine or Gaza in general is under scrutiny. Same thing that we are seeing in Germany and all over the West now, to be honest, whether that's England, France, Germany, all over. So the question is, the idea of free speech, and that's what we're going to talk about a bit here. What does this actually now mean, especially in the West, since free speech is what the West, it's almost its identity, that this is what they're so proud of, is free speech. And then their ability to speak. Free speech is also given a lot of attention because it could be the means of progress, innovation, and many things. So to discuss this, inshallah, we have our brother Mazin Abdul Adhim and also Abu Musa. Both, they travel all over, they speak in many different events, they discuss the issues that are very close to the Muslim Ummah. They are in two different countries now as they speak to us. So, inshallah, brothers, first of all, welcome to Islamic Oasis, brothers.
Assalamu alaikum, Shaykhina. How's everything, Sheikh Muhammad?
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Brother Mazin, are you on? He froze.
Yeah.
Can
So
you
I
hear-
have a mediocre internet connection. So if I come in and out,
Okay, yeah. Well, you are going in and out, actually. Okay, khair, inshallah. So, but this is, I swear, this is for a long time. Okay, Sheikh, because it keeps happening. You're freezing. Brother Mazin, can you hear me?
yeah. So I think,
Okay.
yeah, I can hear you now. Yeah, like I said, it comes in and out. So hopefully it doesn't happen too much.
Okay, all right. So let's start with this thing, this idea of free speech in the West first. Sheikh, anyone we can start with Abu Aisha here or Abu Musa. Abu Musa, Sheikh, so tell me, what is happening? Where is? There's a lot to talk about, especially this idea of free speech. So let's begin. Let's talk about Canada there. What's the issue with Canada? What's going on?
So, as we know, this there was a conference speaking about the Khilafah and this fall of Khilafah in the Muslim world in 1924. That has been a disaster for the Ummah, and since the fall of the Khilafah, the Ummah has been without a shield. And this conference is a yearly conference. It's there to discuss these issues. However, on this, in Canada, the country where we were to believe that there is freedom of speech, freedom of political association, as long as you're not promoting or inciting terror or violence against, you know, minorities, things such as that. That these things are allowed. However, what we saw was basically this idea being trampled on. And this is being trampled on by no other than those people who pretend they want to call for free speech, want to call for, you know, free discussion, the Western enlightened values of criticizing the best ideas, and finding what will be remaining. However, Islam is a target. Islam, Muslims are not allowed to have this opportunity. And this basically, it's very clear that, a no-name article, a no-name journalist trying to make it big, wrote an article with a lot of fabrications, a lot of lies, and this was basically at the local mayors, who got very afraid and frightened that, oh my God, this is this is a terror conference, this is that, and they basically did very little background check of themselves. They basically went ahead with this very no name brand writer, with a lot of fabrications, and went ahead and believed it as to be true. And then we saw Elon Musk, the so-called savior of free speech, retweet this fabricated article, until it reached the whole world. And then obviously then the calls came to find this conference and then cancel this conference. And of course ultimately the federal government issued a letter, saying that calling on the organizers to cancel this event, so on and so forth. And ultimately, unfortunately, the event was canceled. But this basically demonstrated to not just Muslims here, but also Canadians as a whole, and the Western world as a whole, that there is this idea of free speech doesn't exist anymore. It is a free speech is what is determined by the powers to be. It is there's these values they've so-called went to spread and import through the gun and the bombs, they don't actually stand for. So, I mean, this has been an ongoing set of wake up calls for the Muslims community in the West, in Canada and America and the UK. We know what's happening in the EU. Palestinian protesters are being, in Germany, the police are, stopping all these things, and then the rest of the Western world. So, what we see is as the proverbial date god that the West had being eaten by themselves because they got hungry.
Is Brother Mazin? I think he. Okay. Well, all right. Let's say I think he may come back. I'm not sure what's going on in the background here, but Sheikh. So there's a lot of discussion, of course, about decline of the West, and usually when we define decline, we talk about ideological decline, meaning that the ideas that a nation that they held it so close to them, these ideas is what defined them. But now they are the same ideas that they took so almost as holy are becoming the reason for their decline. I mean, first of all, what is the connection here, Sheikh, with ideological decline and free speech, especially when it comes to West? Okay, well, I can't hear you, Sheikh. Hold on. Okay, go ahead.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, this is a very great question, Sheikh Shirazi, which is the link, the ideological link, which is basically ultimately, as as we understand in this society that basically man is free. You go to the Washington Monument where Lincoln is. There's a huge wall writing exactly what the West stands for. Freeing, liberty, freeing from tyranny, freedom of consciousness, consciousness, thoughts, freedom, bring man free from whatever notions they have. What we notice is that all these values which built, you can say, built the ideological structure of the West, is at this point it is It is something that is, they claim they have as an image, but in the reality, they contradict it day and night. And basically, this notion of, and this is where we as Muslims come and have to be critical about this value of, is man free? This whole question, what does this mean, freedom of man? What are you being freed from? So this is basically where we have an opportunity as Muslims to present to mankind, including the people in the West, that this ideological structure, ideology they've been given is actually contradicts reality. It contradicts the nature of man, and actually Islam, as Rabbi ibn Amr said, is to take people out of the worship of the creation to the worship of the Creator, and to bring from the narrowness of this life to the vastness of the hereafter in this life. And that the idea is there's no freedom, that any state that is ruling, it has its own agenda, it has its own policy, and that as long as you are singing the tune of that power, they will let you sing whatever you like. And this is very clear. We've seen there's these AI tools, the Chat GPTs or the DeepSeek, the one from China. You ask these AI bots the questions that are very sensitive in their countries, they'll give you the quote unquote free speech, which is the answer the state wants. So this is a notion that we as Muslims need to understand, the freedoms, the concept of this life, liberty, and all these values. They are empty sloganeering, and actually at the core of it, there is no free man. Rather, it is men, the corporate powers, the corporatocracy, the oligarchies, and the government and the politicians who work for their interests, they determine for you what is freedom. So this is one of the realities we should note today.
Brother Mazin, so is free speech dying in the West, Sheikh? I mean, is this something that when we talk about free speech, let's say, I mean, is it dying in a sense that it is, you cannot afford to have it in the West anymore?
So, Bismillah, alhamdulillah, wa salatu wassalam ala rasulillah. I think the main point really is that the whole concept of freedom was always a lie. And this is not just like a platitude, oh, it was always a lie. No, like it literally, really was a lie. There's no such thing as freedom. Every society has laws, right? So they never had freedom of expression or freedom of ownership or any source of freedom. They called it that, but what it was is that they called their set of laws freedom. It's like when we say that, like, for example, like we say that Islam liberates, it frees people from the slavery of people, human beings, creation, to the slavery, to worshiping Allah Azza wa Jal. So we call that freedom, right? We're liberated from the slavery to human beings, and we're liberated to the freedom of worshiping our Creator exclusively. And so we call that freedom, but we don't go around and say that you're free, because we're not liars. The West, the reality is, and it's a very simple concept, that if you go up to anybody in the West and say that, are you free to drive over the speed limit? Are you free to not pay your taxes? Are you free to go out, for example, not wearing anything? Are you free to get married to more than one wife? Are you, free to call people to jihad? Are you free to, and even now, are you free to support Gaza? The thing is that, or to speak out against, actually to say bad things about Jews, for example, to deny the Holocaust. Whatever you want, right? You're not free. You're only allowed to do what the government allows you to do. So it's not that is freedom dying. Freedom never existed. It was just a bunch of their laws. And they are very good marketers and very good manipulators who say that our laws are freedom. Our laws free you. Because the truth, by the way, the real root truth of what freedom is and where it all came from, where it was all born from, which is the separation of church from state. So when they were freed from the imposition of the laws of God. So when they say our laws are freedom, what they mean is that we were freed from the church. And so when we make our own laws, now we've been liberated from that. Because this is where all these freedoms came from. The four freedoms were born from after the birth of secularism, and that came from the Dark Ages into the so-called Enlightenment. And so they just say that we're now free. What are you free to do? We're free to do whatever we want. But you're not free to do whatever you want. You're free only to do whatever we allow you to do. So they said, we're now God. and we're going to make the laws instead of God making the laws for us. And the problem that they had back then, of course, was that they again, people are so narrow-minded and bigoted and anti-other that they didn't even bother to consider that, oh, well, look at these guys over on that part of the world, and they're like flourishing, and they're at the most advanced nation, and they're clean, and they're educated, and they have like thousands of books. London at that time only had 3 books chained in the book of in the so-called library of London, because paper was so valuable that people were stealing it. Whereas Muslims had hundreds of thousands of books filling their streets, gold and silver everywhere. Everyone was doing great. Everyone had a very high level of morality. They were elegant and all the things that the West wished that they would be. But they still would say, these guys are whatever. So that's the whole thing, is instead of looking at that and saying that, oh, maybe those guys have understanding, they said, well, no, the church is evil. God is can't tell us what to do. God doesn't know what to do. God doesn't know how to rule our lives. He obviously is making mistakes because the church is making mistakes. And so they separated church from state, and they gave birth to these ideas of freedom. So in the West, the goalposts of what freedom is it's always going to change based on whatever the people say, because that's the whole point. The whole point is that this is the legislation of man. So if man legislates that, saying that the Holocaust is never happened, or the numbers are significantly less, if they say it's a crime, it's a crime, and you were never free to say it in the first place unless they said it's okay. So now they're saying it's not allowed for you to criticize the Zionists. It's not okay for you to support Hamas. It's not for you to X, Y, and Z. So okay, well, that's basically it. Now your freedoms are now. Again, it's not that your freedoms are limited. It's just that they've now defined you're free here now. You can support the Zionists. You can support literal sniping of children, 2 shots in the chest. You're absolutely allowed. You're free to support that, but you are not allowed to support Hamas going into occupied Palestine and doing anything at all to liberate Palestine, to fight back, because now you're a terrorist. So that's the truth of it. It's not that freedoms are gone. It's just that freedoms were never there in the first place. So it's
Sheikh,
just have new rules.
But here's the thing. This is to now both of you guys. Anyone can jump in here. But how much of this idea of freedom of speech that is being now fine? Okay, we agree that there was no freedom of speech from day one anyway. This is all under laws. But how much of foreign policy, what's happening in what's happening in Palestine, what's happening in China, how much of that is affecting this idea? Meaning, look, at the end of the day, fine. Some may define it as that, look, you may not have been able to speak, like for instance, Saudi and many other places, I can't maybe even have this conversation, but you're able to sit in the West and have this conversation. But so there's two questions here. One, I don't know how long we'll be able to have this type of conversations, number one. But number two, foreign policy, what's happening in general in international world arena, is that affecting what the West claims to be freedom of speech? Abu Aisha, go ahead. You can, or Abu Musa, I don't want to keep. Go ahead. You can take it, and please, Mazin, or Brother Mazin.
Yeah, no, I think basically this this post Gaza, the genocide, the murder of Muslims of Gaza and Palestine, ask Allah Azza wa Jal to give them healing and give them a victory and return them back to their homes safely. I mean, this has exposed this this and the reaction of the Zionist entity and the world public opinion seeing this entity for what it is, and it always was. This is really, it's sort of like, we all are parents, and if you have a kid who breaks the law, he violates all decency, you are responsible for that child, and you will be held accountable for helping, feeding, and sheltering that child. And this is basically what has happened, is that the Western powers who ultimately starting with the British, who invaded the land of Palestine in the around the 1914 1915 year, and then the Balfour Declaration that created this entity. These are all parts of the Western foreign policy. And what it is that as we see public opinion shifting against this entity's actions and what it has done, it really exposes the belly of the West. And of course, what we've seen is it definitely has an impact um, on their societies, on what they have built this empire on this notions of humanity, justice, equality. All these notions, the people themselves don't believe it anymore. So it's a critical thing to protect not the foreign policy affects the home interior policy, and the interior policy is the freedom of speech or letting people out to criticize and speak as they wish, is that going to affect us internally? Because both of these policies are very important for any nation, the interior policy and the external policy. So what we see is that the foreign policy is now impacting the interior policy. So they need to clamp down on the interior policy, on what's happening at home base, and then part of that is to crush any dissenting voices. Now, as you mentioned, like the countries in the Muslim world, they will go and they'll put you in prison, they'll put you in jail, they'll torture you, they'll do all types of horrible things. Mind you, they're paid by the Western powers, supported by them. And in these countries, it's more about making your life difficult. You want to speak about the key issues? Well, we're not going to allow you to. We're going to use this shame tactic. We're going to use the media. We're going to use lies. We're going to use this Twitter, the X platform, which is supposed to be, supposedly for freedoms, for against the woke agenda. We're going to use this to shame you and do all types of things. And that's what they're doing in the West, is that the Muslims who want to speak about these issues, or the people who want to support the issues of Palestine and so on and so forth, they want to shame them, they want to sideline them, they want to make their lives hard. And we see this is nothing new. This is the ways, the sunnah of the tyrants and those who are on batil, falsehood. They cannot challenge an argument, so they need to stop by many different means, including these initial means. So that is how I view it. Barakallahu feek.
Go ahead, Sheikh. I mean, if you want to add something to it, go ahead. If not, I have following question. I have a follow up.
I guess just a quick point on that is that it's really it's honestly amazing, because as Abu Musa mentioned, is it Abu Musa or Abu Aisha?
Hey, I'm both their fathers. All right, we go with Abu Musa. Yani, Adat al-Arab.
Abu Musa.
Yes.
Yeah,
But you guys that call me Abu Aisha, go ahead, brothers. No problem.
So Abu Musa, as he mentioned, which is that Britain and France, really, those were the days of the intellects of the West. They're gone, long gone now. As much as we hate them as disgusting and horrible and cruel, genocidal, bloodthirsty monsters that they were, but they were thinkers, they were intellectuals, they were statesmen. They knew how to play games with societies and economies and politics and move things around. They knew how to manipulate us to become loyal to them and look up to them. The idea of James Bond and all this kind of stuff, and the British accent being elegant, and looking America, the American dream, and all these marketing tactics and all these ideas that they established. That was the age of the peak of the West. They really were at their peak. They came into a nation of Muslims who had a superior system, a superior way of life, a superior military, a superior everything, and they managed to completely subjugate us, right? With this basically ingenious system of puppet governments and nationalism, and they brought in sports to get us to get us trained to love nationalism. Same thing with the Olympics and all this stuff to get us attached and fighting each other. And I remember even when I was in Iraq, when I was younger, I used to watch the soccer game, and I remember that those soccer games made me loyal to Iraq, made me more of an Iraqi, and made me dislike or even hate Kuwaitis and Iranians and everybody else basically who we used to play against. And we used to hate them because when we lose against them, we were angry. It instilled nationalism and so on. They had all sorts of ways to just brainwash us into a system that had nothing to do with anything we've ever had since we became Muslim. Rasulullah didn't do it. No Sahabi did it. No Tabi'i. No, not the Umayyads. Not the Abbasis. Not the Uthmanis and so on. So after all of the work that they put in to build up this magnificent machine of deception and lies and corruption and spreading of kufr and division, nobody has destroyed it faster than the Zionists, right? Like, people say, oh, they're so smart and they're so manipulative and they control it. No, they are some of the dumbest people in the world right now. So the thing is, the whole West, and so it really goes to show that the West has just lost it, because these sociopath, bloodthirsty murderers, occupiers of Philistine, these people have drank their own Kool-Aid, as they say, right? They actually believe their own lies, that they're strong. They actually believe that they're invincible. They somehow have convinced themselves that God is on their side, and now they can go and kill whoever they want. And they don't understand that the only reason why this is happening is because you're protected by all these monsters around you, all the tyrant government. But if any one of them falls and the Muslims start uniting, it's over. It's guaranteed over. So, and the reason why this is, and this goes to the point about the West, is that the West has always tried to maintain control of the Zionists, because they know how sociopathic and arrogant and self-centered and condescending that they are, and how dangerous they are to the region, to the American interests, the British interests, European interests. Yet America is now jumping in on their bandwagon, helping them out and supporting them and giving them money and so on. And so it goes to show how politically ignorant and foolish they are, because they're tearing down all these walls of mirages and lies. So everybody's starting to see, like, all these, when you have a play and you have all these boarded up walls, like, if you ever see the sets of these shows that everybody watches, and imagine the walls falling while they're acting. It ruins the whole entire scene. It ruins the whole entire mirage of somebody, being a character in a movie or something like that. Or if they look at the camera or something. So the thing is that they're tearing down all the walls, all the fake walls, and everyone's now seeing, wait a second, this whole thing is a lie. This whole, like, there's no freedom, there's no human rights, there's no international courts, there's no law for anything or anyone except for whoever the America says, whoever the Zionists say, whoever has power and money. Suddenly the whole world, and they're trying so now with the media to try to make it look like, oh, no, everyone's supporting us. So they have tons of people that are being paid. They're just throwing so much money around. So many influencers have come online and said, they came to us and they offered us 1,000, 2,000. Some of them they got offered 10,000. They're offering small amounts of money in the grand scheme of things, but they're spreading huge amounts of money around to try to. They think that they're smart by doing all this manipulation. But they don't realize that, there's a lot of loud voices at the center of social media and so on, because these guys are all paid and they're all benefiting from this. But at the peripheries, which is like 98% of the planet, who are not all, social media influencers, everybody can see what's going on, and almost everybody agrees that this is absolutely insane what we're seeing. Like, we're watching a live massacre of children and women. The videos are irrefutable. There's nothing anyone can do to say that, oh no, these are all actors. Like, how? A child with his limbs ripped off, or a little girl stuck underneath a building, or a child walking to the hospital screaming, looking for his mom. You just can't fake this kind of stuff, right? Of course, somebody could say, well, it's acting, but nobody believes it's acting. Everyone knows that it's all legitimate, and the thousands of videos and images that have come out. So it's this whole idea of international law and so on and so forth. It's gone. It's long gone. And the West has just become truly, truly the example of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He said that we will become ghutha, like the ghutha of the froth on the sea. And this, Allahu alam, most likely means that we're just going to be moving with the movements of other nations. Right, as the water goes left, we just float with it, and as we go right, we just float around. We have no will of our own. The water moves us around, so the world's moving us around. All the tayarat, so the ebb and flow of political activity. We just move with the flow. But he said, and during that time, the Ruwaybida will speak. For a long time, I thought that was an individual, but now that more time passes, you realize that it seems like he's talking about the Ruwaybida as the people. Right, these people are Ruwaybida, the rulers. Like, you have Donald Trump and you have Justin Trudeau, and you have, like, all through Europe, you have some of the most foolish leaders. Right, the Muslim lands has been riddled with these clowns who are not. They wouldn't even deserve to sit near the table, much less lead the table. All around the world, people but especially the West. People are looking at the West and they're saying that this is absolutely ridiculous. Even Obama actually came out with a video, and he was talking about how, like, Oxford is filled with people who you wouldn't put them in charge of anything. He says you go to meetings with world leaders and you're looking at a lot of these guys and you're like, how are you here? right? So Obama is starting to talk about this kind of stuff. He's saying from his experiences. So that's the thing, is that the West has fallen. It's not just the only reason why it still exists as a power is because there's nothing to compete with it. There's absolutely nothing in the world to compete with it. Not China. They don't have an ideology. Yeah, people say, "Well, China." No, I don't. China doesn't have ideas. They only have, an economy. Same with Russia. They don't have ideas. So there's no competing ideological nation. That's the reason why it's still standing, and all this stuff is still going on.
But is that okay? So now here's well, there's a lot of things that you said there that need to be unpacked. But let's say, even in Joe Biden, in his last speech, he said something very interesting. He said he's worried that a bunch of oligarchs are taking over the country. This is very interesting that a president of a nation like United States is basically warning the country, saying that, look, this is where it's heading. Especially the techno oligarchs, moneyed people. And of course here you look at Donald Trump. I think almost 20 of his appointees are multi-billionaires. Elon Musk is in Germany. He's trying to figure out what to do with the right wingers over there and things like that. So is this a contradiction, guys? I mean, when we talk about money and what is the connection here? A connection to capitalism here, money and freedom of speech, and how what are the realities of these two ideas? Anyone can take
I'll just quickly say here, I think it's a very simple point, which is that the West has always been smart enough to hide the big money guys. They would never, back when they were smart, they never put the billionaires on the front line in front of television right behind the president. They just had all these guys hiding, and those guys influenced, and they gave money, and they had all sorts of control. But the president always tried to pretend that, oh yeah, I'm here for the people. Again, they were intelligent. They knew how to manipulate the masses. Now you have people who are complete and utter fools. They're not really statesmen. They're just businessmen, and they're running the country like a business, like a fool would, not a statesman. Like a very low thinking person who just happens to have a bunch of money and is able to make more money. A lot of people, if you give them $50 million, they can make another 50 million from that. It's not that difficult if you have $50 million, especially if you just go buy a bunch of property and just sit on it. Someone's going to go up, someone's going to go down. Who cares? Just wait, and then you'll have another 10 million in 5 or 6 years. So that's the thing, is that once your parents kind of give you a $10 million loan, as a lot of these guys have, almost all of them have had a jump start from their parents. And that's the thing, is that so these guys are not intellectuals. They're not, and even if they were intelligent enough to build up their businesses, these guys are not statesmen. They don't understand sociology. They don't understand psychology. They don't understand political trends. They don't understand political analysis. They're just simpletons who have successful in business. And I've met a lot of these guys, by the way. I had computer business and so on, and I used to do computer work for big IT or for big corporations and really wealthy guys. And I used to sit there and I used to just think that these guys are some of the biggest, like imbeciles. But because they have a lot of money, they think that they're so smart. And you just look at them, so their analysis is so shallow. It's so poorly thought out. But again, because they made a lot of money, they think that, oh, I must be smart in everything. It's a crazy phenomenon, and it's completely infected the West, completely, through and through. And it's amazing.
What do you think, Abu Aisha? I mean, this idea of connection of money to politics, like Brother Mazin is saying, look, this was always there. It's just that it was in the background, and these guys were smart enough not to bring that out there. But I mean, you're looking at, I mean, this guy came with a mandate, almost 2 million extra votes, or a popular vote and stuff like this. Why is that? The average people like people of money like this, and they what are the people thinking, Sheikh? These guys are going to develop the country. These guys are. What makes the type of support that they came in with into the government? I mean, before people used to be anti-government, anti-money kind of thing, but now it looks like they're.
I mean, the thing is, I think it's more about Biden losing the vote. Right? He lost. He lost whatever he did in the last 4 years. He lost the people, and then they chose the same fervor that we saw in 2016. It's not there. People are very, as far as I've seen, there's obviously some people are very invested in what's happening, but most people I don't think really care or have that much vested into the political system. The complaints that we see, right? These, for example, we've seen the H-1B visa issue where Elon Musk and the other capitalists, the other, I forgot the name, but the Indian guy from the right,
Yeah.
Ramsawi, Vivek, yes. They say they're on the right, and the right philosophy should be jobs for Americans, right? But they are capitalists. Elon Musk has to run this Tesla. This he needs the engineers. So of course, he's going to before bringing in high tech workers from India, other places to work for these on this H-1B visa, so that they're tied to this company. They don't have to pay more wages. They cannot leave this job. They're tied to working the engineering job. So they're pro globalization. These so-called the right wingers. When he got exposed by by the so-called maybe more sincere or more truth. When I say sincere, I mean sincere to their right-wing cause, whether it be Steve Bannon or these other people who said, no, this H-1 visa should be canceled. These are American jobs, should belong to the Americans. They basically, as capitalists, they are really capitalists. They are a transhumanist. They don't believe in this party or that party. They have goals that are beyond. Elon Musk has goals in space and so on and so forth. So these individuals, uh, they support the globalization, the capitalists of making labor cheap. They do not have any real feeling for the American people or the white worker or so on and so forth. They have interest in growing their business, and we saw that that fissure between the right, and the fact is that we're going to probably see that more, where the people are, hopefully, if they're smart enough to realize that the Trump or Musk or all these people do not have the interest for the American people, the average Joe, you can say, because they are at heart a capitalist. They believe they have the freedom to own, and this is the greatest freedom they have. It's inbuilt in capitalism, that the man has the right to own in as much as possible, has unlimited needs, has unlimited wants, and his purpose is to dominate. So if it means complete control of industries, complete control of multiple industries, that will be their goal. And therefore, this basically, it's the decline is very apparent, and we are just, I believe, in like the final stages of the capitalist doctrine, that this is the so-called tyranny that when America was formed was to fight, the British Empire. They themselves have become that tyranny, and it is the capitalist elites who are controlling the people. And then when we had Muslims want to have a simple conference, they want to talk about these issues, or Muslims are living their lives. We saw the hatred, the same old plan to redirect this anger to the Muslims, to the other, and we can see, like, most people are probably not even buying it nowadays. So we've come full circle, and inshallah, this is where people need to wake up.
I mean, I want to come to the immigration issue anyway, because I think that also has some things to do with freedom of movement or rights or freedom of speech. But there's something else here. I mean, the first in the inauguration itself, he mentioned something. He said, finally, I guess the Americans have figured out that there is only two genders, there's male and female. And so this, I mean, it was amazing to hear the president of the country saying that, look, from now on in this country, there'll be only two genders. But the destruction that this has caused, for instance, now, if you look at the public radio, you listen to, leftist, liberal radio, things like this, what's happened, let's say like Chicago, this is considered a sanctuary city and things like that. There's a lot of transgenders. There's a lot of people who were uh, they came under this whatever discussions that were going on for the last 4, if not 8 years. It was craziness, Sheikh, and so now you can't have these flags, the whatever, the flags, the color flags that they had, it's not allowed anymore on the buildings. The people can't, they can only say they're male, female. The whole marriages that were done are kind of, that's another issue. It's becoming an issue. People changed their genders. People went and actually literally had surgeries. People were sitting there in universities and college campuses sitting and they were thought that there's 26 genders, and all of a sudden everything has changed, and the damage has been done. How is that connected to these ideas of freedom that has caused now so much damage to so many people? And then it could be after 4 years somebody else comes and says no, there's 5,000 genders. Go ahead, Brother Mazin, and your thoughts on this.
Well, I think with Trump it's a little bit of a unique situation, because the real mistake is to overanalyze the thought behind this. I think he just, his first time got elected was kind of like, he just made it through. The second one, he's kind of like, I'm untouchable. I'm going to do anything that I want. He just starts just doing anything he wants. So he really thinks that he's smart. He really thinks that
he's chosen.
Untouchable.
He keeps saying he's chosen by God.
Exactly,
because he could have been killed twice, and he basically God saved him. I mean, he's so over and over. He keeps saying that I'm selected, I'm elected. Go ahead. Sorry.
And inshallah he is. Inshallah he is to destroy the capitalist system. I mean, it's, expose all the mistakes and all the lies and all of the, it's just, sure, why not? Maybe he's right. So the thing is that, it's just at least from my perspective, the way I see it is that he's basically, a Ruwaybida, but one of the senior Ruwaybida. And he just basically is now in, and he can do whatever he wants, and he's just, smashing all the door down, and he feels like, well, who can stop me? Nobody can stop me. And so that's
fine,
what I mean.
Go ahead, but I'm asking you a bit more of a different question here. That the amount of lives that were destroyed in the last 4 years, in the Biden, as far as, let's say, a government is coming and actually supporting people and saying that, oh, go ahead, change your genders, go ahead, you can get under the knife, and programs, huge amounts of programs, money being just thrown at anybody who wants to do a surgery, whoever says that their gender is such and such. And all of a sudden today, the whole thing has changed. Now there's many of the programs are being cut down. People don't have that same type of support. They need medicine. People have to go back to the hospitals, clinics. So I guess what I'm saying is that, when we talk about these freedoms, the damage that it causes to society, while they change their thoughts every 4 years, I guess that's the question. How does Islam look at these things?
Yeah, so I mean, this is one of the things that there's been so many discussions about this, at least that I've witnessed throughout the years, where this is the problem with man-made law. Human beings don't know what's right. So as they continue making laws, they ruin people's lives. And it's not just a transgender and LGBT thing. It's everything. Like, for example, marijuana was illegal, so everyone went to jail. Suddenly it's legal. They're still in jail. Right? You have, there's so many things. You allow people to have relationships without marriage, and how many children have suffered because of this? How many women have suffered because of this? How many women now suffer from emotional pain and trauma from getting hurt, from going from man to man to man, because men want short-term relationships, women want commitment. Society says that, well, no, there's no commitment required, so therefore women have to suffer, and men get what they want. You have just countless examples of man-made law that just not only ruins the lives of those who they're trying to protect, like people, the Americans, the Canadians, and so on, but across the world they go there and they just bomb and kill and do whatever they want, and then one day they change the law and say, okay, no, this is no longer allowed, because they found it convenient, because they are benefiting by not allowing it. This is the whole point of allowing human beings to make laws. And Allah Azza wa Jalla told us, وَمَنْ أَعْرَضَ عَنْ ذِكْرِي فَإِنَّ لَهُ مَعِيشَةً ضَنْكًا. Whoever turns away from my dhikr. Now, people sometimes will interpret that as saying like remembrance of Allah, but the dhikr is Allah Azza wa Jalla's message, His reminders, everything that He sent us. So all of His laws and instructions and guidance, whoever turns away from that, he will have a miserable life. People might say, oh no, we're having fun and whatever. Everybody who has a very fun, exciting, wealthy lifestyle, all of them say the same thing. In the beginning, it's lots of fun. And then after that, they realize that, no, this is not solving the problem. I remember I saw an interview by Matthew Perry, the guy who plays Chandler in that huge show Friends. And he said that for the first 6 months, when the show succeeded, he made millions and he was very, very wealthy and having a great time. And then he said 6 months later, I walked into my house and I was like, oh, this isn't solving the problems that I had before. He went into a massive depression and he ended up killing himself. He committed suicide, became a huge, massive alcoholic and drug addict, and he just couldn't. That's the thing, is that that's the problem. If you stay away from the guidance of your designer, then it's going to lead to an absolutely miserable life. So that's the natural occurrence. It should be expected that people are going to have their lives ruined when they live according to anything that human beings invent that are not taken from their creator, because you're not a designer. You're not a human designer, meaning like you're not the person who can design the site. Like we don't even know how the brain forms concepts electrically. Like, how are those connections made? Yeah, they have a very rudimentary understanding, but how do we know how concepts, how psychology, how all these elements of how the brain forms memories and so on, how does it all work? We have absolutely no clue, almost whatsoever, much less any understanding of how to fix anything. Or depression, they just give a person a blocker, basically. So human beings have no idea how to deal with any of this stuff. So how are you going to make laws and guidance for human beings when you have no idea how anything really actually works with human beings? And that's why it's always going to lead to misery. And that's why and that's by the one thing that we talk about, which is that human beings require one of the proofs that we require a message from our creator is the fact that we have no idea how to fix anything. I'll give one quick example without going on for too long. But one quick example is I always use the example of marriage. If you look at the male-female relationship, if we were somehow to have a database where we could like memorize a database, okay, of every single possible outcome of every single male-female interaction, every single thing that could ever happen between a male and a female, and you were to try to determine from this set of data what is the absolute best way for a man and a woman to have a relationship, short-term relationship, promise ring, engagement, marriage, one wife, two wife, 15 husbands, marriage, you can divorce later, you can pay her for an hour. Like, there's so many possible ways you can organize a relationship. Like praying mantis, you have a relationship for a day and then she chopped your head off. You can, what's the best way of organizing, a male-female relationship? And so the thing is that even if we had all the information possible in all of existence, we still would have no idea what is the best way to organize a relationship. To have the offer and the acceptance and the mahar and the two witnesses and the father involved, and divorce has to be with the man only. There's 3 divorces. You can take back with 2 divorces. On the 3rd one, she has to go and marry someone else, and it has to be a natural divorce. All these things, right? There's no way we could figure out that, and because it's from our creator, this is the absolute optimal way to organize a male-female relationship. There's absolutely nothing better that you can possibly do to better calm people, create tranquility, create ease, stabilize the desires, etc., make women and men happy, right? And yet, and so that's the whole point, is that so we human beings can't know almost anything related to human interactions. Who should we be loyal to? Who's our brother? Who's our enemy? How should we react when we get angry with somebody? How much profanities can we use? When can we lie? All these things. There's no way to know. So that's why we need our creator's message, and that's why the West will always ruin everyone's life, because it's not only, by the way, like human beings. Now it's some of the dumbest human beings in their society are making the laws. So it's just so much worse.
The issue now, but Musa, I'm sure you're following the immigration issues in the U.S. The borders are closed. People are being literally, there's raids all over the place. ICE, the organization that looks for immigrants, are all over the place. We are very close to Spanish neighborhoods, where the center is. So we're constantly aware of, okay, there was a raid by ICE today. And also a lot of international students are here. So we're constantly aware of what's going on in the neighborhood around. Everyone's life changed within 2 weeks. People are not going to work. There's a lot of students and huge amount of, at least Spanish that I know, and also international students in general, are not going to work. They're sitting home just watching to see where this is going to go. each person, I think if you let someone know, or if you let, I guess, the government know, then it's about $700 per head. It's nuts, man. I mean, it's so uh, we it seems like whenever the capitalist economy is failing, it's always about the other. It's never the system itself. What do you think, Sheikh? Yani, when we look at what's happening in the U.S. here, and I don't know how much of that affects Canada, for instance.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's a very good. Sorry, you bring up a wonderful point, and this shows the Western civilization, which presented itself as enlightening man. It's actually created nothing but instability for the people who live in Western societies. It has there's a change every 4 years. It's rip and replace. What was good or acceptable 4 years ago is changing again 4 years later. Um, and the reality is there's going to be victims. There's going to be victims. For example, in Canada, when there was shortage of workers, they brought tons of students from India and other places to come and study. But really, the goal was for them to work, and they worked, and some of them sold all their lives, properties, and families to come here to get the opportunity to live in Canada, the U.S., and this is obviously in Canada. And then once they were done, okay, you did your job. Sorry, we're not going to give you any permanency here. You can go back, right? And because why? Because the situation's changed. There is no guarantee for the people. And the funny thing is, the so-called right wing that obviously spews lots of hatred and towards Muslims. It's actually completely misplaced. The hatred you should have is to the capitalist elites, the ones who are using you, the ones who are abusing you. It's not the Mexican worker. It's not the Pakistani so-called grooming gangs. It's not this conference that's going to happen. These people are being bamboozled. And the reality is that this is where we have to show the difference between the Islamic civilization and the Western civilization. The Islamic civilization, the contract Umar Abdul Anhu made with the people of Al-Quds in the time when he conquered it, and in the time of the Khulafa Rashidin, is something we would honor till now. It's something we as Muslims would honor, because this is what Islam brings. It brings the guidance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's rules and laws do not change with time and place. Rather, we hold to our covenants. We hold, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, awfu bil uqud. O you who believe, Allah opens Surah Ma'idah, fulfill your contracts. Awfu bil uqud. Fulfill what you have taken. So there's a difference between the Islamic Ummah, which wants to take leadership of mankind to guide mankind, versus the capitalist or the Western civilization that wants to steal from mankind, take him apart, take all the resources, and then leave him to die. And this is what we're seeing, the instability in the West. And there's lots of these victims every 4 years with a different set of victims.
Brother Mazin, the Islamic State will not have borders? I mean, everybody will be able to just come into the borders, just come in, walk into the state? Is that... I'm just going with what he's... I understand what he means, but, for clarification, someone can say why states have right to close or open their borders. If you want to come in legally. How does Islam have to? How does Islam look at this? The issue of borders in this specific situation here, when it comes to any. I mean, if we had something like Mexico and U.S. border.
Yeah. So remember, the idea of a border is it's based on a concept of a permanent border. So what you're talking about is about a permanent border, which therefore is a nation state. The Khilafah doesn't have the nation state concept. It's a gray zone of a border. It's just, our border is just the area that it's as far as we've reached, right? So that's the main point. So people can come and go,
but security
there'll
is
be
an
controls.
issue, is it not, Brother Mazin? I mean, there is issues of security. I mean,
Yeah, so the main point is that people will be allowed to freely enter and leave. the main thing really is when the Khilafah is reestablished, is going to blow away all of the concepts that people have about citizenship and nationality and passports and so on and so forth. Because what it's going to establish to people, it's going to establish this concept that it's a society for human beings. It's not a society for Americans. It's not a society for British. It's not a place for British people. This message was sent by the Creator to manage human beings. So it's a society for any human being that wants to come in, any human being that wants to travel, any human being that wants to move across or come in and out. It's just, if you're a human being, you're allowed to come through. You're allowed to, but the state will have, of course, they're at the peripheries. There will always be the military to make sure that nobody's going to us. And if anybody's coming in, there may be checks on who you are, if you're a spy, and so on. But really, it's going to be very, limited and restricted, because we don't want people to feel like we're attacking or suspicious of everybody. But there will be checks and so on. And even if spies get in, whatever, come and enjoy yourself. I mean, they're not. The spying is only going to be significant if they go into the state, buildings, or trying to find out secrets. But if you're going in society, yeah, come live. Like it's for everybody to live here. So. What's the spy going to report on? Well, everybody has ownership of all the oil wells, and people, trade in gold and silver, and there's men and women respect each other, and etc. Like, what exactly are they going to spy on? So that's basically it. That this concept of even border control. If you're going to put all these walls and buildings and chairs and computers, what are you going to do? Move it every single time that the state expands a little bit? So that's why this stuff is all going to be, just generally in existence as state border security, but there's no permanent borders.
Yeah.
And just to add one more thing, the one beautiful concept is just to even imagine that once the Khilafah stabilizes and justice is very widespread, and people have a very strong sense of ownership of their society. They go into the society and they not only feel excited that I can build this because this is mine. It's true. It's not like you come in and you're deluded into thinking, oh, Dubai is fantastic, I want to come and help build this and have a business, and then suddenly they kick you out because you said something against the government, or because you said something about some Islamic political idea and they don't like it, or you spoke out against the Zionists. No, it's like it's a state that where it is yours. Everything is yours. The government is just there to just manage the mass resources that it's not for anyone to manage on their own. You own your own private stuff, but like societal level resources, this is what the state takes care of, and the societal level issues, this is what the state takes care of. And so this idea that if somebody's living in poverty somewhere and can just find his way to the Khilafah, you just be allowed to come in, and that's it. You're a citizen, and you're a 100% citizen. You're not a naturalized citizen. You don't have to be here. You don't have to get a visa. You don't have to be here for a year or two before. You just walk in, and now you're one of us. This is your society now, as long as you want to live here. The only requirement that exists is that you have to have tab'iyya, which is an agreement to follow the law. You don't even have to agree with the law. In Canada, you have to agree with the law. You have to swear allegiance to the Constitution, and you have to have all these sorts of ideas. In the Khilafah, you don't have to pledge allegiance to Islam. You just have to say, I'm willing to obey the laws of the land. Well, okay, ahlan wa sahlan, welcome to the Khilafah. You're now a full-fledged citizen, because there's no such thing as a citizen. You just live here. That's it. It's just very simple.
But there's no, so they can just come in and live, but there's no time limitations. None of those things matter.
I don't know.
Oh,
No, it's nonsense. Why would we have that? You just walk in and it's yours.
So here's the thing. So now I'm sure, I don't know if you guys are following what was happening in Davos with the whole economic forum things, and all kinds of speeches were being given by all these politicians and owners, corporate owners, bankers, everybody's there. And there was one interesting thing that was said was in the coming 4 years, what Trump era will look like. So they were saying, when it comes to the global south, the growth in global south will be 0% in the next 4 years. It will go backwards. Europe will stay at 2%, and the rest of and United States will be at 2.7%. Sheikh, I mean, brother, Mazin was just talking about that, how the system is actually to serve humanity, it's for human beings. It's not just for Americans or the British. It looks like, Sheikh, are we looking at majority of humanity, which means that global south means 90% of the world, if not 95, 96% of the world, is going to go back to 0% growth, man. Which means as we go forward, most of the world is going, as one or two countries, let's say, go forward, or even few people or few corporations in these countries go forward, the rest of the world is going into darkness. What does that mean for the coming generations? Go ahead, Brother Musa.
Oh yeah, I mean, what I take from this is that this system is not built for human beings. It is actually illogical. I took economics 101, 201, so on and so forth. The premise is that man has unlimited needs, and if the man should take from others in order to fulfill his unlimited needs. So therefore, it creates a very selfish ideology. The thing I was thinking about what Mazin was saying is that if we look at any center of town, right? The center of town that's buzzing is the one where there's lots of people coming. They're coming. They're bringing their restaurant, their food. They're cooking. They're building up. When the people gather in one place, that society, that city flourishes. People want to come there. People want to visit. So Islam, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala, wants us to interact with each other. يا أيها الناس إن خلقناكم من ذكر وأنثى وجعلناكم شعوبا وقبائل لتعارفوا. We have created you, men and women, in different nations and tribes in order to know each other. So we have a very positive outlook when we meet other people from different backgrounds. We don't have a hateful outlook to the other. In terms of course, in terms of this bigger question of the economy, I would say that the way the system is set up is that the superpowers, they impoverish and enslave the other nations around them, and this is a big difference. If you look at the Islamic history, when the Khilafah Bani Umayyah, or the Khilafah's history, wherever it goes, it grows and builds that society. When Islamic rule goes in North Africa, it doesn't take the resources from North Africa and send it to Medina. Rather, it will take the resources where it needs to be, and it will put it where it needs to be, and it will develop and grow the new land that the Muslims liberate for the sake of Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. That city will grow, and Subhanallah, and in our history, the Islamic capitals would shift to these new places, whether it be from Medina to Damascus, to Iraq, to Istanbul. Look at the difference between the way Muslims view things and the capitalists, which is ultimately just to suck out the resources and enslave the other nations.
Brother Mazin, what do you think, Sheikh? 0% growth for Global South. So are we looking at, what are we looking at? Wars? This coming, look, in the last, let's say, 20 years, we have seen we saw Arab Spring, most of South, North Africa, for instance, we're seeing what we happened and what we're seeing in Syria, what's happening in Gaza, what's happening in most of the Muslim world, to be honest. Are we looking, so what does the next 4 years, what do they look like, Sheikh? Especially if more and more resources will be taken away from majority of the masses, and there is no, there is obviously global competition, and in very intense competition actually between, you look at China or the US, and then everybody in the middle is trying to find some space in that competition. What does it look like, Sheikh, the next 4 years?
Okay, I can't say what the next 4 years will look like. I personally don't think that it's going to necessarily. I don't think this is going to be the major cause of all the upheavals, but it could be. But the thought that comes to mind is that the West perceives the economic problem to be an issue of growth, an issue of production. So as long as production is increasing, then everyone is fine. And if production slows down or stops, then the society is doomed to collapse. But this is wrong. Islam says that the economic problem, is an issue of distribution. So even if the economy doesn't grow, as long as the wealth is distributed properly, then everything works very, very well, significantly better. So the reason why production is such an issue is because you have a very, very tiny percentage of the population who's sucking up 90+% of everything that exists in terms of wealth. They're just taking all the wealth and they're just hoarding it. And that's the other problem, is that it's not like you have one person who just eats a lot of food and flies a lot of planes and wants to live in a lot of houses. This is a person who's just taking billions and putting it into a bank and not allowing anyone else to touch it because he just wants all this stuff in his bank account. So that's the problem, is that it's an issue of distribution. If production is a problem when you have the hoarding of wealth, when everyone's taking everything, well, we have to produce more, because if I've taken almost everything, we have to produce more so everyone can have something, right? We have to make more so that people have something. But what Islam says is that no, you just take all the stuff that this guy's hoarding and just distribute it. Zakat. Like if you take all the billionaires and you take 2.5% of what they've hoarded every single year, you solve world poverty in like a year or two. Right? I remember this one brother here in Canada. He did a calculation of what would happen if you just applied zakat on the excess wealth of all the billionaires and millionaires in the world. You almost immediately balance the world economy. Right? Just the amounts of money that comes out of these people is just absurd. It's like orders of magnitude of anything that's being done in terms of trying to send aid and all this kind of stuff. So I think what's going to happen in terms of this problem of production is that people are going to get obviously more frustrated. They're going to start questioning the system, and again, they're going to start trying to blame anything except for themselves. I think maybe, hopefully, because one thing that we are noticing now is that people are becoming more aware. The world is just becoming more aware of everything, what's going on. They're becoming more aware of the corruption of the capitalist system. They're becoming more aware of the wealthy taking everything. But not just that, they're becoming more politically minded. Right? So as I travel around and I talk to people almost everywhere in the world, especially in the Muslim lands, the strong practicing Muslim lands, you find that people are just naturally becoming more politically aware and politically minded. They're analyzing politics according to Islam. So not just thinking, like people have been political since the 40s and 50s, even earlier 30s, but it wasn't according to Islam. It was according to Western thinking and so on. But people are starting to think outside of the Western model. And so it's leading people to analyze the Western economy and analyze our economies and analyze the Islamic economy and so on and so forth. When I say our, I'm talking the Muslim lands. And so it's, aside from the turmoil and trouble that might occur due to poverty and people getting frustrated and rising up and so on, it's more importantly leading to people waking up and trying to actually understand. This is one of the things actually that the Hizb talks about in a number of our books, which is that we talk about the Hazzat, right? The shakes or the earthquakes. Every time there's an earthquake in the Ummah asks what's causing this and what's the solution. How do we prevent this from happening again? And every time they do that, they look at the Quran and Sunnah a little more. So, whether it's the first, whether it's the Nakba or the invasion of Iraq, or what happens in all the death and destruction in Kashmir, or what happens with the Uyghurs, every single time the Ummah is shaken. Now, the Gaza is like, I would say it was like a punch in the face, or not just an earthquake, it was like a monsoon or a tornado. But every single time the Ummah is shaken, they ask, what is this? What's causing this? And what's the cause of, like, or even if you're to look at it as like a pain in your chest or a pain in your leg, every time it hits again, you're like, oh, at first you're like, whatever. And after a while, you start researching. You might even become a medical expert after enough time of looking into what's causing this. And so Muslims are starting to look back into the text of Islam, and they're getting very, very knowledgeable, very, very, they're getting a deeper understanding in a way where it doesn't look like they're becoming knowledgeable. But if you compare the average Muslim today, compared to the average Muslim back in the 40s and 50s, we got a bunch of scholars over here. Like, we're an ummah of very knowledgeable people. The average Muslim is very knowledgeable now. The average Muslim back in that time was very, very, very ignorant. Very basic. Like, they didn't even understand why they say Salam Alaikum.
That's not the Western thing. I mean, there's brothers who go to to the Muslim lands and they come back and say, man, people are, they're just not connected, or they don't care. That's not something you're sensing?
No. When you go to the Muslim lands, like, I've been to Turkey and I go to Iraq and I go to to Jordan and Oman and Saudi and Qatar well, Qatar was a long time ago, but the UAE, even UAE, you just talk to the average Muslim, their level of understanding of the political solutions of Islam, their level of understanding of what we should do as an ummah is significantly better. Their level of understanding of what it means to rule by Islam, their level of understanding of even nationalism, right? People might still be loyal to nationalism. I know lots of Muslims are still loyal to it, but they kind of recognize that it's kind of bad. It's kind of not allowed. Like there's lots of Muslims that I've spoken to, and they're very loyal to their tribal affiliations and all their borders. But when you talk to them, they're like, "Yeah, we know it's not right, but I'm kind of attached to it." And so they're at that point where they're like, emotions are in the way, but the thoughts are there, right? So that's the thing, is that the ummah is very, very advanced. In terms of the non-Muslims, they're becoming much more aware, but they don't have a foundation to go to understand what to do. So they're just like a person caught in a whirlwind. But the Muslims are starting to really, really wake up. And so the question is, what are the non-Muslims going to do when they hit very strong levels of poverty? You might see a lot of fighting and uprisings and rebellions and that kind of stuff. And the West can just easily quell that, because those people have no solutions. They overthrow the government. There's like 500 people that's easily replaceable. With the Muslims, we've become a real problem, because you can't replace a ruler unless he's an Islamic ruler now. You just can't, or unless he's just an absolute monster who's just going to kill anybody who questions him. So they're going back to the old days of tyranny. Like Mohammed bin Salman kills anybody who questions him. El-Sisi kills anybody who questions him. Like it's just, or tortures them, or throws them in jail for a real long time. So they because they have no choice, because there's no longer room to allow Muslims to breathe and speak, because we will very, very quickly go back to leading ourselves, very, very quickly, and they know that. So they have to go back to good old dictatorships.
This is a very interesting point, Sheikh. Abu Musa, here's the thing. Really, this is a very interesting point. So let's say here in the West, as pressure increases, don't talk about Gaza, we will arrest anyone that seems or sounds anti-Semitic. That only means you are pro-Gaza, or you're saying this cannot be happening. You're against ethnic cleansing. You're against genocide. And let's say this, the oligarchs that are ruling, you have situation already happening with the immigrants, especially with the Spanish community and with international students, whatever. There are crises that are creeping in, and it's becoming a struggle between classes, Sheikh, right? You can sense it now. You can actually sense, as if, that people are saying that, look, if you're white, if you are from that class, to the point, man. Look, I'm here in Chicago. When you live in Chicago, you know that. Okay, so what level of people you're dealing with as far as wealth is concerned. You drive about an hour and a half from here into let's say suburbs, and you can see the difference between the lifestyles of the people just within an hour drive, right? Just wealth is just all over the place, and so there is a conflict that's coming, Sheikh. But the point I guess I'm trying to make is taking what Brother Mazin is saying, or Brother Mazin, I'm sorry. Is it possible that the Muslims in the West, because they have something to fall back on at the end of the day, because the system that they live in within that's falling, that's crashing, we're going to have to go back to taqwa and tawakkul and Islam, deen. Is it a possibility that the Muslims here may start taking the lead in general?
Well, I'll tell you this, like, we cannot go back to how we reacted after September 11th, which is to basically, we basically be in an extreme state of fear and scared and not talk about anything and try to hide away. What we need to do is talk and engage and do what is necessary. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَلْتَكُن مِنْكُمْ أُمَّةٌ يَدْعُونَ إِلَى الْخَيْرِ وَيَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَيَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنْكَرِ وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُفْلِحُونَ. That there arise out of you a group, this can be scholars, could be Islamic groups, or whatever may be the case, that calls to the good, enjoins the good, forbids the evil, and they are the ones who are successful. Right? And it says, يَدُونَ الْخَيْرِ, calling to the general good, which is the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we need to follow this. We cannot let any small noise scare us and run away and hide away. This is actually something that will create more. The tyrant will even squeeze harder. And subhanallah, we have an example in our brothers and sisters in Gaza. Look at the patience. Look at the sacrifices they've made. You know, look at the sacrifices to what level they've made. So if we have to do some pain, some pain here and there, but we are sticking to the truth. We're speaking what is haq. We are calling the people what is good. We're exposing the false beliefs and the false how the system oppresses everybody. This is our duty. This is not the time to hide away. And this is my advice to the Muslim community in America, in Canada. It's not the time to hide away and shy away. We have to engage, and of course use the best tactics and be smart. But this is a time for, number one, we should be united with the Muslim community. We should connect with the scholars and mashallah the good brothers in our communities, and really. Don't be appeased. Just try to appease everything. Every time some guy comes and he starts speaking tough, we start getting into appeasement mode. This is not befitting of a person with iman. Who فَلَا تَخْشَوْا النَّاسَ وَاخْشَوْنِي. Do not fear the people, fear Allah Azza wa Jal. So I would say this is very important, and I think when you say taking the lead, what we want to do is that I believe the sunnah of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in every society, and there's the haqq and then there's the batil, and the people of haqq have a duty. They should not necessarily look at each and end objective. It should not be speak the haqq because there's a benefit, a maqsad, a maslaha. No, you do it because it's right, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to ask us about it, and then we have tawakkul Allah. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of us if we serve Him the best way possible.
Brother Mazin, I would like to hear what you have to say about this. This is very, there's an interesting phenomenon taking place, in what we are seeing. I mean, really, I think obviously this is dawah opportunity also, but I think when you have an executive order that's going to go out saying that you cannot, speak against certain things, you can be deported. This could have a very, you're talking about huge, massive amounts of people who have spoken for Gaza, for Palestine, university students, professors. I think Intifada, what happened to that Intifada? I think it was a newspaper. The head of that, the journalist, has been deported now. He lives somewhere in Europe, I think. So how do we make sure that we navigate through this properly, Sheikh?
So I think what I would say is that it's a bit of a tricky thing to kind of assume, to be honest. But it might be time for a lot of Muslims to go back. See, the thing is that I'm not suggesting that we all leave necessarily. I'm not suggesting that we all stay necessarily. But it's an interesting thought to consider as a possibility. So for centuries. Yeah, centuries we lived in our lands. 1,340 something years we lived in our lands. We took care of things. We had troubles and some wars and divisions and whatever, but we were generally united, and we lived on our lands. That's how it worked. And then the colonialists came, divided us up, killed us, took all our wealth, put monsters over us. People said, okay, well, we can't live like this. So and the West, and of course then they taught us, we're better than you. Our lives are better than you. Come over here and work for us. And so we went there and we worked for them. And then that generation that did this, who didn't understand kind of what was going on, gave birth to some kids, and then they kind of grew up and they kind of got used to that lifestyle, and they started looking back and saying, hold on, what's the cause of all this, and so on. And then so we're at a point where a lot of Muslims want to go back. We want to go back and fix this. We want to figure out what are we supposed to do. Most Muslims you talk to want to be like quote unquote activists. They want to find a solution. Whether they're working with the American government, they're voting, they're doing all these silly things that because they don't have an Islamic vision, they only have the vision of the colonialists. These are all natural things that are going to happen. Not everyone's going to figure it out. But maybe Allah Azza wa Jal is going to push us all back. Yani, وَيَمْكُرُونَ وَيَمْكُرُ اللَّهُ. Right? Maybe Allah is going to destroy them with their own hands. Because think about it. What if they start deporting everybody or they start scaring everybody, even as something as simple as that? Muslims start saying we can't live here anymore. So Muslims start going back to the Muslim lands, and then Allah Azza wa Jall's victory comes, and we're all here. We're all, all throughout the Middle East and North Africa and Asia. We're all back there, and then suddenly the victory comes, and we're all here. We're already ready. And so we just stand up and say, okay, well, let's fix things. Or not all necessarily, maybe some of us, maybe most of us. It's just a possibility that maybe Allah Azza wa Jal is preparing the ground for us, for things to shift back in our directions. One of the things that I have noticed is that, at least in my head, this is kind of how I visualized it. Not always, but I've especially recently, I've kind of visualized the way it feels to me is that you kind of look at it as the globe with rain clouds. Right, the rain clouds have been gushing over. They were gushing over Britain for a long time. The majority of the water of the world was just pouring over Britain. A lot of it was over France, and then after World War II, it all moved over to. Well, most of it moved over to North America, and Europe started losing some of the rain clouds. America started stealing all the rain clouds, and of course, the source of all the precipitation comes from the Muslim lands. Of course, they're just trying to create all these winds to bring all this wealth over their lands, and with that. These rain clouds isn't just the wealth; it's the intellectual wealth, right? The Muslims have been very simple in their thinking, very disorganized in their thinking, very wanting to be like the West in their thinking, very much enslaved, colonized minds. But now, when you travel through the Muslim lands, you start to notice that there's actually the winds are kind of coming back in this direction.
That's true.
You find that the wealth is coming back.
We see that in Turkey. We see that in many places. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, you look at the businesses that Muslims are starting. Not only are they very well organized and very smart, but also they're Islamic. People want their Islamic identity to be the base of their business. I've seen a lot of countries where people have been obsessed with businesses, and then now when I go there, I notice that it's not about just forming a business; it's about forming a business as a Muslim. Right? When people take a stand on anything, they take a stand as a Muslim. So the intellectual wealth and the physical wealth of the world seems to be coming back. It seems to be mostly focused on the Gulf area, basically the Middle East area. That's kind of where it's really coming back, like starting at least. Who knows where Allah Azza wa Jal will distribute things? But at minimum, it seems to me that there's a lot of good coming back in this direction. And again, the strength. Like, here's another thing. One thing I've noticed is that a lot of brothers are going to the gym now. Guys are getting into MMA. We look up to people like Khabib, and we love Khabib not because he's a great fighter. We love him because he's a great Muslim fighter. Right. So even when we love Muhammad Ali, right, we don't love him just because he's he floats like a butterfly and stings like a bee. It's because he's a Muslim who was politically.
That matters. No, go ahead. No.
Yeah, and that's the thing. It's because he's a great fighter as a Muslim. Every single person, and that's why, by the way, a lot of the great fighters today, when they're not outspoken politically, they're not very popular. Right. So the reason why, like even Andrew Tate, the reason why he became popular was because he started talking about things that we agreed with as Muslims. And when he started doing things that we don't agree with as Muslims, he lost his popularity with the Muslims. So that's what it is that the Muslims are standing up very clearly, economically, intellectually, and it's all established on an Islamic identity. And so if they're going to start kicking everyone out, well, I guess maybe we should just say thanks for helping us do something that most people wouldn't have done unless you helped us bring us back. And if people are forced to come back, we'll start rebuilding our lands. Right?
Final question to both of you. Look, you said something in the beginning. The one of the reasons, let's say, the West is not falling completely, it's not collapsing, let's say, is that there is no, an ideological state that is competing against the West, or let's say capitalism in general. But there is still a competition between China and the US, whether we like it or not, right? I mean, just the other day, you look at, I guess it was NVIDIA, whichever the card is that they're using for AI, things like this, 600
Yeah,
uh,
NVIDIA.
million, was it 600 billion, something like this? It crashed 2 days ago.
Yeah.
And and just because China was able to bring something called, what is that called? Seeker or something like it?
Deep seek.
DeepSeek.
DeepSeek. And within a day or two, the stock market is crashing and things like this. Um, so are things shifting towards the east? Even if there is no ideological competition, are we going to see towards the east? And if that happens, can the Muslims benefit from this?
Yeah, I'll go first.
Let me go first.
Yeah, sure. Let me go first, inshallah. Yes. So the thing is, I think as Muslims, we need to realize, our aqidah is our strength, and it's our only strength. Our aqidah, our beliefs, is what gives us strength, and what honors us is our beliefs in Allah Subhanahu wa Taala and His Deen of Islam. And one of the things is that the constant of reality is change. Change is the constant of reality. Um, if we understand this, then we will realize that as a Muslim, we should not be living in pessimism. Rather, we should be optimistic. We of course know the world order is as is. There are powers which are dominating today, and that basically have their own interests, and the Muslims are victims to these powers. That being said, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala gives us a mission and an objective that He, Allah Azza wa Jal, believes we are capable of doing. So the objective of ours, whether the power be in the west or it be in the east, it doesn't matter. We need to stick on the path and we need to move forward. And the reality, as you mentioned, because I thought it was nice, is that as Muslims, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, قُلْ جَاءَ الْحَقُّ وَزَهَقَ الْبَاطِلُ إِنَّ الْبَاطِلَ كَانَ زَهُوقًا. Say the truth has come and then the falsehood has perished. Indeed, the nature of falsehood is it perishes. But interestingly, Allah did not say just zahaq al batil, just like that. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Qul ja al haq. The truth has to come first, and then the batil will perish. So that's what is the idea we need to have is that, the Muslim lands, that is basically where these the fangs of the colonial powers has to be removed, and those who are loyal to the colonialist power and the UN, the international systems, they need to be removed, and that what we should see is the colonialists came in the Muslim lands, yes, physically, but also by tacit approval by those who are supposed to protect the Muslim lands, those influential class. That class and those people who are here today, they need to have some shame and answer the call of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and do what is necessary to work for the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and that realize that, the West, once you're useless to them, they will throw you in the garbage. So you should rather be sincere to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and give support to the Muslims and the message of Islam, and unifying on a political basis the Muslims as a whole.
Hold on, Sheikh. Brother Mazin, I'm going to add something to the question that I asked Abu Musa. With this thing that happened, and this was a massive effect of what happened on the stock market in the last 2 days, especially with DeepSeek, I guess it's called. The thing, I guess, the question I want to add to that, if you can answer this, the level of corruption that's affecting the corporate class here in the West, meaning that they realized that China could do something like this within $6 million. This is what it cost them. The open AI system that free open AI, whatever that means, available to masses, to everyone. They just put it out there. Anybody can download it on their computer, phones, and they can use this. And it just cost them $6 million. While the American corporate class has just taken billions and billions, not trillions on this AI issues. And I think a lot of people have realized, even in the West, that they were investing in these companies, and in reality, it seems a lot to do. It has a lot to do with corruption than innovation, And so, how, is the West, this idea of West is, being Western, and the technologies in the West, the minds are in the West, the thinkers are in the West. That's what we need to be. Do you think now this shift will also, from a different perspective, that no, the West is falling, the minds are actually now shifting, we have a lot to do, and we have some amazing minds that we can develop? I guess that's the question to you, Sheikh. I mean, would that be can there be a shift in thinking, or is there a shift in thinking already?
So there's two big separate topics actually here. There's one topic which is can China is China going to become a big issue, a big threat? Can they kind of take over? And the second question is the Muslim perception of like the mirage of the dominance of American technology and how that's going to be affected. So in terms of China affecting anything, this is actually a really interesting topic. Again, it's an analysis. It's possible. I personally think so, but I could be wrong. So the way that I see it is that one of the things that Hizb ut-Tahrir actually has tried to explain to the Ummah is what a mabda is. The best English word that we can find is ideology. But the word ideology is used in a lot of different ways. The word mabda actually means a starting point or a foundation. So it's the foundation point for understanding of why do I exist and how can I live according to that. Like, there has to be a system for that belief. Why do I exist? And there has to be a way that we can all, as human beings, live. Not just me or my own opinions. It has to be all human beings can see that these laws are human laws, and for all of us. And people will end up, Muslim, non-Muslim, doesn't matter what you are, you kind of end up agreeing with it. You kind of see, it's just like Muslims come in secularism. They come and they see the freedoms and whatever, so everyone can kind of move along with this. Communism, it's about looking at society as no one has ownership of anything and everything should be evenly distributed. Any human being can come and take part in this. So that's what an ideology is. It's a system and a belief system that allows any human being to participate and excel and grow according to that particular system. So the problem is with communism, with China, is they're not communist. People say they're communist, but they're not communist. They have some remnants of communism, but they're really a mix of capitalism and communism, the same as Saudi is a mix of capitalism and Islam. So when you have this kind of hybrid mishmash of ideas from different ideologies, it's a conflict. It's not like you're taking an idea from like some economic ideas and some psychology, and these are contradictory, conflicting, impossible to reconcile things. The only way that you can reconcile them is if the system is a system of compromise, like secularism. So it's a system where you compromise by keeping your personal religious beliefs while abandoning your political laws, because you're not allowed to use religious laws as a religious person, you're not allowed to use your religious laws for legislation. And so the problem with China is they have a very, very powerful economy, but they have no ideology to carry to anybody. And therefore, they will always be ineffective in the world of politics and moving nations and gaining their loyalty. If China comes to anybody at all, no matter how much money they throw at them, no matter how much growth they offer them,
but
economic
the thing,
growth.
Sheikh, I'm sorry, I'm cutting you off here, but Sheikh, what ideas does the West have to give anymore? I mean, it's
so that's the second topic. Okay. Oh, so actually, no. If you're talking about the first one in terms of the ideology,
there's a shift here. Because look, I guess ideals. Here's the thing. I mean, what ideas? For instance, when we look at the way Trump speaks, he says, "Look, if EU does not fall into what we're saying, here's what we're going to do. We're not going to protect you. Or if BRICS drops the dollar, then we'll come after you." And this is the type of discussion that's happening. It's not our ideas is what we have to offer you anymore. It's you don't follow. It's
yeah. So all these things are still within pure ideological capitalist view.
If China does that, look, if China comes and says, if you don't follow what we have to say, we have the bigger guns, maybe bigger guns than the US. Does that all it takes? I mean, does it have to be ideological?
No, not at all. No. So the guns and so on, that's not ideological. Ideological is to tell people things like democracy, for example, right?
I know.
So when you have America
nobody
coming
wants
to the world,
to the point here.
That's not true, though. It's not that bad.
I guess in a sense, look. I mean, when you look at, I guess I'm literally the things that are happening in the U.S. here. Trump literally put in, I guess it's a constitutional amendment for the third term, because they're looking at this thing and they're saying that, look, this constantly changing of leadership doesn't work. They need some type of stable leadership for a while until they can, so the American ship doesn't sink. They're looking at China and saying that, look, one of the things that they do have going for them is that they have stable leadership. So that I'm not saying that's against democracy or capitalism, but what I'm saying is, can it be that anyone, it's no longer an ideological space, rather it's more whoever has the bigger guns will run the world? I mean, it's jungle complete.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like that, but still, that's still a capital. It's still ideologically capitalist, because capitalism is the aqidah of secularism and the system of democracy. So as long as the people vote and they accept the extension of 3 years, like a third term, or whatever else it might be, it's still within the confines of them. They're still ideological capitalists. They're not suddenly borrowing from communism. They're not suddenly borrowing from Islam. They're not suddenly, borrowing from other systems. Whereas when the ones who are non-ideological nations, they're borrowing from other systems. They're borrowing from capitalism. They're borrowing from whatever they can mishmash together. And because really, what for them it's about is, they're, first of all, they're not ideological. They're not deep or thoughtful enough to even know what an ideology is. And second thing is, they just want to stay in power. So they're going to make up all sorts of laws, like Saudi. They're going to own everything. They're going to kill whoever they want, throw anyone in jail. It's about me. I want to rule by this, and you have to listen to me because my family is important, and we're going to name the whole entire place after me. So with America, it's still ideological. It's still about the voice of the people, because now the people are starting to say, they're saying that we want this ruler, and they're saying that we want this ruler to stay, and they're saying that. So it's still people saying, it's still not God legislating. So it's still secularism and it's still democracy. So it's still a relatively pure ideological nation. That's why even when we talk about the Uthmani Khilafah, by the way, they had a lot of corruption, but it was still Islamic. They were still ideologically Muslim and Islamic, and that's why they were still so powerful, right? They had some kind of they had some influences, but they were not making a system that was a mix of man-made legislation or the production of the tool from communism, or whatever other system they could have taken from. They would just simply had the Islamic system, and anything that they took from the West, it was taken in through the filter of Sharia, right? Because they were obviously ignorant of how to do ijtihad towards the end, so they were taking Western laws, and claiming that this was from Islam. So they're still using the Islamic process, just like the West is still using their capitalist process, even though they're bringing in corrupt. So they're at the end of their age, the same as we were. The Uthmani Khilafah was at the end of its age. They're corrupting their laws because they're getting greedy and they're getting lazy. The difference is, it took us 1,340 years, so 40 something years to get to that point. For them, it took them like 400 or 500 years, and so they're totally falling apart. So that's the first point. So the first point is, in terms of China or Russia or anyone else becoming a threat, Saudi, the Middle East, nobody is going to be a threat to the U.S. because the U.S. and Europe, as long as they're pure ideological capitalist nations, they will always be able to lead other nations. They'll be able to go to other nations and say freedom, democracy, human rights, women's rights, etc., etc. And everyone's like, oh, those are wonderful things, those are ideals, and we don't know of anything better. So China can't. They don't have any of this. What are they supposed to say? The Chinese motherland. We love Mother China. China's great. We love our great leader. Like, no, nobody's going to go for that. Nobody. It's not an ideal for humanity. It's an ideal for Chinese people. The second point, which is a topic of the growth of technology and economy and America falling apart and so on. So the thing about this one is interesting. Although it's shifting, I don't think it's going to cause much. By the way, so going back to the original point with ideology, just so I can kind of like nail this point down, which is that as the da'wah of the Hizb and the Ummah calling for the return of the ideological Islam, we've tried so hard for decades to get the Ummah to understand the significance of an ideology, the significance of being ideological. And China is a beautiful, wonderful example, inshallah, a gift from Allah Azza wa Jal, for the world to see that it doesn't matter how much money and technology you have, you cannot become like America and Britain. And the question has to be why. Everyone has to ask, why isn't China doing what America and France does? Why are they not able to do what the Soviet Union was able to do, and all that spread and getting everyone loyal to them and people becoming a part of their and growing and so on? Like, why, if China goes to another nation, they don't join them? They don't want to become Chinese. They don't want to be a part of the way of life of China. So people have to think about this and reconcile this. And once they start doing that, they'll start to learn what an ideology actually is and how Allah Azza wa Jal has designed this program. If you want to look at it as human beings as like, like designed and programmed by Allah Azza wa Jal, this ideology program affects us in a very specific way. And it's the only way for nations to become as powerful and as advanced and as driven as the capitalist nations and the Muslims. Back when we first started with Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we became ideological Muslims, and that's why the growth, and that's when you look at all the technology and all the growth and the math and sciences and alchemy and algorithms and all this stuff, the invention of zero. This was not because we were focused on technology. It's because we were ideological, and it drove us in a specific way to excel at looking at how do we manage our lives, and how do we manage material, and how do we manage thought, and how do we manage math and science, and look at math and science from the perspective of everything is created by our creator and so on. We were ideological. That's why we were powerful. It wasn't because we prayed enough, and it's not because we had all this wealth, even though prayer is a part of our ideology. But that's not what makes our ideology. Our ideology is a specific perspective on everything in this world. And when you have a state level understanding of how to run all these things, everyone becomes ideological and they start solving everything ideologically. And that's what makes Muslims extremely powerful when we become ideological. That's why, going to the issue of technology, the West fooled us into believing that it's and we fooled ourselves, especially in the end days of the Uthmani Khilafah, is that we thought that the advancement of the West was because of their technology. But it wasn't. It was because they became ideological. They came out of their dark ages because they adopted the idea of separation of church from state, so a new aqidah, and they have adopted a system for that aqidah, which was democracy. So they said, okay, God doesn't tell us what to do. We tell ourselves what to do. Our ideals are freedom and so on. But then how do we implement that? So they started rummaging through books and whatever until they found democracy. And they said, okay, well, this works because it came before. It predated, of course, secularism. And so then that was the birth of capitalism. So now suddenly you have these people who are incredibly driven. You look at their early years, like you saw what happened to Britain and what they did and all the technology that came and how smart they became, how organized. I'm not just they're smart, everyone's smart, like throughout all nations, but how organized that intelligence was and how focused and how beneficial and productive it was. It's because that's what an ideological mindset does for you. And that's what when you dedicate resources of society, ideologically, that's how powerful that becomes. So we thought that it was technology. And that's why, by the way, Muslims are always like, oh, become a doctor, an engineer, and this and that, and all these different degrees, because they thought that the way that the West advanced was by becoming engineers and doctors and all this stuff. But Muslims became doctors and engineers and all that stuff. And nothing happened. We're still slaves, we're still garbage in the world, and nobody cares about us. Nobody listens to us. We can't even stop the weakest. And by the way, this is an interesting thought. The literal weakest group of people, militarily and psychologically, on the planet. Okay, I'd go as far as saying that about the Zionists. They are some of the weakest, most spineless people on the planet if they were to face us in a real war, right? And yet they are able to do what they're doing. Right. So the thing is that we have to understand that that this mirage of Western technology is not what made them strong. It was their ideology. And the second thing that's also really interesting is that if you look at the whole entire world right now in terms of the status of nations, the West are the most advanced technologically. Absolutely, no doubt, because again, they're ideological and they've dedicated the resources of the whole world to their own economies. By the way, they're just sucking up all the wealth. That's why they have all this stuff. But at the same time, if you were to analyze the world in terms of morality, psychological stability, tranquility, we're the most advanced nation in the world. Right? They're the most backwards by far. They're as backwards morally and psychologically as like Egypt is technologically and architecturally. Right? Like that's the problem, is that people only gauge progress and advancement by material things now, because the capitalism has tricked them to thinking that this is the only measure. If you advance, if you grow, if you have technology, that means you're great. But you're a disaster psychologically. You're a disaster emotionally. You're a disaster morally. Right? They're a rotten, putrid pool of disgusting, I don't even know what to call it, in terms of morality and psychology. They're a mess, right? But you go to the Muslim lands, the practicing Muslim lands, we are the most advanced people in the whole entire world morally. We're the last stand against the LGBT, corruption. We are the people who have a sense of morality towards innocent people, wherever they might be. We have courageous stands, and we're not afraid of sacrificing ourselves. And even the concept of the Bill of Rights, it's a when you really think about it, we don't think that way. We think about rights and responsibilities. And we see sacrificing in relationships or in our lives and suffering in our lives as acceptable. I'll suffer for a good cause. I'll suffer for my children. I'll suffer through a bad relationship as long as it keeps my kids happy, or I'll suffer through a bad job just so I can bring food home. But the West says, no, you don't suffer. It's all about you. Quit your job and leave your kids and leave your family and do this and burn everything to the ground because it's all about you. So morally, psychologically, and even in terms of stability mentally, you go around the Muslim world, we don't have these issues. We don't have issues where I don't know what a woman is. We don't have issues where everyone's depressed and taking pills. We don't have issues where people go through really hard difficulties and go to drugs and alcohol. The people who drink alcohol and do drugs in the Muslim lands are just simply people who just want to party and have fun, and they're corrupt and they're far from their deen. They don't go to that stuff because they're depressed. It's not a culture that we have that people go towards these things when they're having emotional problems, because we don't have those emotional problems. And the people who have those emotional problems, they're basically like Westerners. Because they're living the same kind of lifestyle. But everyone else who's living a generally Islamic lifestyle, we don't have those issues. They do. So that's the other thing too about the issue of technology. Yeah.
Khair, inshallah. I think that there's a subhanallah, there's a lot of, I think, new topics that you came up within. And there are a lot of issues to be discussed, inshallah, Sheikh, and to unpack bismillah ta'ala. But again, we don't have time. This is we've been going at it for almost hour and a half. So brothers, again, brothers, jazakallah khair for coming on the show. And I know it was just on the go. But there's so much going on both in Canada and the US. We had to kind of bring in the brothers and see what they're thinking about what's happening. And still, amazing job. Jazakumullah khairan. And to brothers and sisters, please subscribe to the show. And there's a lot of work that also, please look at what Islamic OASIS is doing in many parts of the world. And also, we will be putting out the programming for Ramadan and pre-Ramadan and also during Ramadan, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
لا لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر لا 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 لن يطول الظلام ديننا لن يضام نحن جيل الهمام نحن فينا عمر صبح بدا نور ظهر نجم وشمس وقمر ألقى على الدنيا الدرر هذا عمر هذا عمر كل البرايا تنتظر أيامه البيض الغرر كي تستفيد من العبر هذا عمر هذا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح نحن أهل الكفاح نحن فينا عمر لا لن تدوم الجراح بل سيأتي الصباح